Hello, good morning, everyone. Today I have the pleasure to interview Mr. Alexander Rahr. Mr. Rahr is a well-known intellectual, the president of the Eurasian Society in Berlin, fellow of the Rand Corporation, board member of the Petersburg Dialogue, member of the Valdai Club, honorary professor of the Moscow State Institute for International Relations, and honorary professor of the High School of Economics. His academic life spans for more than 40 years with a considerable bibliography, lectures, papers, books, and everything, both in Germany and in Russia. I don't know if you would accept my definition, Mr. Rahr, but I would say you have devoted your life to the understanding and rapprochement and Näherung of both Russia and Germany. Is that more or less accurate?
Yes, I have devoted my life for I would say, some kind of reunion, mental reunion, historical reunion of Germany and Russia in Europe. And before 91, before the demise of the Soviet Union, I couldn't travel to the USSR. I grew up in the vicinity of institutions like Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, Rand Corporation, and all these institutes, which at that time, of course, fought communism, Bolshevism in Russia. But fortunately, when I started to do my career in America and in German institutions, times have changed, and Russia, Ukraine, and the countries of the post-Soviet space were very much interested and became interested in joining Europe, in forming a new European space, a new European identity on the fundaments of democracy, I would say, yes, and of humanity, and yes, of some kind of future perspectives for Europe. And I joined this perspective, and while working at the German Council for Relations for almost 20 years, this is a think tank of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Germany. I got very much involved in that. I organized meetings, conferences. I wrote books. I was one of the co-founder of the Petersburg Dialogue. I did everything in order to facilitate the rapprochement between Germany and Russia, but also Germany and other post-Soviet states. And I did it very long. I was awarded prizes for this. I got acknowledgements also from the chancellors of Germany or the president of Russia for my work. At the end, I would say some people might say today in Germany that all this work was for nothing. I completely disagree. I think there is a lot of misunderstanding concerning the Ukrainian crisis, which we see now. And sooner or later, I'm sure, will return to the necessity of finding cooperation between us and Europe again.
Very well. Thank you very much. It's a very good introduction. But now I have to go into the heart of the matter, so to speak.
Please do.
When I listened to Mr. Merz speaking of rearmament and so on, I had the impression that the silences, Mr. Merz's silences, were more important than what he said. And as a matter of fact, I thought he was opening a can of worms. Not just because rearmament, and besides, in German context, is not a very nice word, no. But also because he didn't mention, the elephant in the room. The elephants, it's more than one in the room, to begin with. No European Union. What's going to do with all this money? Rearm only Germany? I consider inevitable, if we want to do something with our might, collective might, to pay it by, in a percentage or something. I mean, go beyond the nation state, because otherwise we risk creating a very serious problem of security. Imagine Germany rearming itself to the brim and the rest of us, not so much. It has to be common. He didn't say anything about the European Union. I would like to hear what you have to say about this. Do you think that it's possible to rearm without a common Europe?
Look, you describe the situation as it is. I have to do it myself. I have to agree with you. And then I will directly answer your question about the rearmament of Europe. I think we have a kind of Zeitenwende now, a change of epochs in Europe, a very serious one, much more serious than proclaimed in Germany 2 years ago. Because everything what we have imagined as a reality in the past has disappeared, and we have to face a new reality, a new realism, and a new world order. And this world order is very, fastly, quickly developing in front of our eyes. What do I have in mind? We have a multipolar world. And 10 years ago, we didn't have still a multipolar world. We're talking about countries like China or Russia as developing countries, which Europe thought one should not take too much serious. That has changed. These countries are stronger than Europe today. And so the world has completely changed. I think someone who understands all these matters, all this seriousness of the changes is Donald Trump in America or his team or the Americans in general. And so they are starting to change their politics and the world. And they are approaching Russia because from America's point of view, Russia should never become a military ally of China. They see China as the main rival in future in the 21st century. And yes, parts of America's geopolitics in the future will be designed to isolate China. Also, this is also not possible, but Americans will try it. The European Union, I would say, is somehow lagging behind thinking, behind understanding of what the world is. The European Union, I would dare to say, doesn't exist anymore as it existed before. I mean, we have too many splits inside Europe. We have a very serious deterioration, even a hostile attitude towards Russia. The German politicians are dreaming of winning a war against Russia again. I think this is a complete madness from my point of view. But they are supported in this endeavor only by the Brits, a little bit by the French, but not by the other European countries who do not share these views. And so my observation is that Europe is already split. In the northern part, Germany, Great Britain, partly France, but not really, and the Scandinavian countries, which, excuse me, do not count in matter of big security issues. And countries like Spain, also France, Italy, and also especially Hungary and other East European countries are departing from the Paris, Berlin, and London axis. So the whole leadership concept inside the European Union is drastically and dramatically changing. The south of Europe and the east of Europe do not want to lose America. They understand fully, they are realists. They understand that without America, Europe is defenseless and also somehow teethless without any kind of potentials to do anything on the world stage. Because for the past decades, Europe has decided, or that was the will of the European elites, to follow America in everywhere, in all aspects. So we have a split in Europe. We're talking now about Europe. So your question was whether there will be enough money for rearming Europe. No, there is no money. Besides, the money is in Germany, but the money which the German government now will lend on the financial markets is not money which is earned by Germans, by the German industry. It's credits which have to be paid back one day. So Germany is doing a hopeless approach in this way. It wants to spend practically 50%, even more of the money, which it wants to lend on the financial markets for rearmament. For building up a military-industrial complex of Europe, of a European army. But beside the fact that Europe is split on this issue, and so I don't believe that there will be a common European army, even the idea of the coalition of willing is under a big question mark, because I see only Britain and maybe partly Germany as capable of doing these things militarily on security basis. We don't have the logistics. We have no real satellites in space. We don't have real educated soldiers in Germany. The Brits might have some, but also the British army is not capable of fighting a country like Russia. We see, of course, I mean, there is a kind of understanding here that Russia is not so strong in Ukraine and couldn't capture Ukraine in 2002, as had been probably the wish of Putin in February 22. But on the other hand, still Russia has all these nukes, all has its weapons, all its missiles and special weapons, which Europe will never get in the next 10 years. So a war against Russia is not winnable
It's unwinnable indeed.
It's not winnable. And so what I pledge is, and maybe this is my hypothesis in this interview also, we need a diplomatic solution for the Ukrainian crisis, because the real dangers for Europe will come not now, but in 10, 20 years from the south, from the developments in the southern part of our planet. And therefore, Europe, of course, has to do some kind of rearmament, regrouping, rethinking of its security attitudes, because, of course, the United States will go its way. It's an isolationistic way. But we should not do one thing, what German elites are trying now to do, in my view, to start a war with Russia, or to get engaged into a war with Russia.
Well,
That's not the way.
A few days ago, I was watching a Tucker Carlson interview, and they were laughing at the United Kingdom. They said, well, the Brits want to send some soldiers to Ukraine. And he said, they must be joking, you know. Their armed forces are less than our Marines. Do you realize? So perhaps for you, as a German with a historical memory of Germany, the United Kingdom is very important. But for the United States of America, it's something like Andorra or San Marino, you know. That's the sad truth. If we want to do something, it has to be together. If we are split, what we are doing right now is a fool's errand. We are not doing anything, you know. It's crazy. It's idle talk. Doesn't mean anything. Of course, we cannot go to war with against Russia. But the key question that I would like to ask you is, don't you think that if Germany begins to spending all this money all by itself, that could bring about the demise of the euro and finally the united Europe as we know it?
I think there is a danger, and this is, I think, well, as I understand the opinion of many very serious analysts and experts, that the euro will be devaluated in the next nearest future, because of the credits which and the debts which will face the European Union in general. When Germany starts to take credits on the financial markets as it wants to do, then I can assure you that other countries, poorer countries in Europe, will follow suit and will say, well, if Germany does it, why can't we do this? And the whole European economy may not recover. In contrary, it may fall in a further debt trap. And then the only solution to save and rescue Europe would be something what politicians like Angela Merkel and other never wanted to allow, never wanted to do. Mainly to create a common budget for the European Union. Now that also the common social budgets, pension funds for the whole Europe. It sounds like a nice idea, but it's a catastrophe for Europe because the differences in the economies and in the social systems of, as you know, of the European countries are so different that some smaller or less healthy countries may be saved, like Greece was saved 10 years ago. But the more richest countries, the engines for the economic development of Europe, they will stuck. They will lose their strengths. And yes, then you cannot also of political and economic situations in Europe, you cannot rule out a kind of collapse, economic collapse, and then maybe a political collapse, which then awaits Europe. And the America, which is now in trade wars with Europe, will do nothing to support Europe in this sense.
But that's another question that I would like to ask you. NATO. How come we are going to spend the same amount of money as NATO and still want NATO to be with us? I just don't understand. There are two questions I don't understand. Why do we want to keep alive NATO if we are going to spend the same as NATO? And two, how can we go to war against Russia without the United States behind us? These two questions to me are absolutely incomprehensible. If you can enlighten me, Mr. Rahr, with superior wisdom, you are an intellectual, serious intellectual.
No, I have only one answer to your to that. It's a phenomenon. It's a psychological phenomenon of the so-called rebel-minded mainstream elites in Europe. I would call them the triumphalists. These are people, the elites consist of people basically of deep states of various European countries. And these people who are ruling Europe are today in their 50s, 40s. They lack this kind of experience which the elder politicians had, which still witnessed the Cold War and especially also the Second World War. These memories are gone. These people who are now ruling Europe are very little educated in historian terms, in political terms. They think that everything will be always all right, that the European Union has the highest moral in the world. And it's always developing on the right historical track. And outside Europe, as someone I don't want to mention it, I think it's your
the garden and the jungle
from your country, yes, who said that well, Europe is a paradise, and around Europe we have a jungle.
Yes, the jungle. Rudyard Kipling.
Yes.
The British imperialist said that. He quoted Kipling. He's a socialist, and he quoted Kipling.
But this is what the people think. Mrs. Baerbock thinks this way. Merz thinks this way. I think Starmer thinks this way. This is a neo-colonialist thinking, and completely they lost all kind of touches with reality. And this is a problem. This is even not a problem. It's a catastrophe for Europe because they are driving the whole European Union and Europe into a complete deadlock. We cannot be or find ourselves in a situation we have serious conflicts, even are in stage of war with Russia, with China, because also of morale, because we think China has the wrong morale, and so we are prepared to fight them or to destroy our economic ties with them, and the United States, because we think that Trump is also not a Democrat, so moral on the wrong side, that he's a dictator. So we have to fight against everyone. But inside Europe, we are also starting to fight. We're starting to fight against Orban, against Fico, against maybe the future Romanian president, if he will be allowed to take office, and so on and so on and so on. I think I would say it's on the one hand ridiculous what we see now, but
you're absolutely
very
right.
Awful, serious situation, and this all is being supported and fostered by the liberal press. the mass media, which are an instrument by themselves for pushing these ideas of triumphalism into the minds of people. Very dangerous act because it will lead to nothing. It will lead to a deadlock. It will lead even to worsening the situation of Europe itself, economically, politically, and also militarily.
We will discuss morals afterwards. Morals are very important in the case of Germany, you know. We will go to it a bit afterwards. But I would like to discuss right now with you the German attitude. To me is very difficult, you know, to understand. After 3 years of full recession, because Germany cannot buy gas and oil from Russia, Germany still insists on, you know, more of the same policy, more sanctions, more anti-Russian feeling. How come? Why?
Because of morale, because the Germany is that country which has completely changed its attitude towards Russia. Germany was before 2014, and I would say even before 22, was a country which saw itself as an advocate, as a lawyer of Russia in the West, helping Russia, that was under Schröder, to enter the G8. Merkel was in favor of building Nord Stream 1, Nord Stream 2. And the economic developments and the cultural developments, they stayed attuned, even during this crisis around Crimea and Donbass after 14. And actually, also Mrs. Merkel or the German elites invented this Minsk process, which actually was the right way to stop a big war in Ukraine after 2014, after the events on the Maidan and the Crimea and the Donbass. But again, from my observation, there were other countries, especially the Brits, Great Britain, which always tried to destroy this process, because the understanding of the Brits and today of the Germans is Russia cannot win. And now for the German sees itself as the leader of Europe and as a main leader of Europe. I think it's a wrong notion, but it is so if you look into the minds of the German politicians. At the same time, they think that their responsibility, primary responsibility, is to rescue the European security architecture. In their view, the situation where Russia could win in Ukraine, that means get eastern Ukraine under its control, and enhance its territory up to the Dnieper, up to Kiev, is something which would, in German understanding, destroy the European architecture, which has been so carefully built under other conditions in Europe after the demise of the Soviet Union, against Russia, actually. And so it's a very serious fight which is going on. Many countries are not participating in this because they want normal relations with Russia. Some even think that we have to find a common vivendi with Russia. Europe cannot be against Russia because Russia is the greatest country, the biggest country from its territory in Europe, and we cannot be always in conflict with this country and with its people of 145 million people there. So in Germany, this is forgotten. The Germans want to fight for this European architecture, which has been created basically by the United States, Great Britain, France, and Germany in the 90s, and built up in the 21st century. With NATO expansion, with the EU expansion also in the post-Soviet space, what Russia resists and where Russia says no. And this is the biggest problem. So in terms, this is the geopolitical picture which I have described, but more important is the moral picture, because Germany thinks, and is always saying, that the European Union is a Wertegemeinschaft, a club of values.
It's club of, yes, well, it's a way of talking, because they invented Minsk to swindle Russia, to allow Ukraine to rearm, which is contrary to a basic principle of public international law, which is fulfilling in good faith the commitments that you have accepted, you know. So I don't see this word country at all. They swindle Russia to begin with. And second, there is another question, very serious question: the support, unrestricted support to the state of Israel. I'm so sorry to say it, but Israel is not fulfilling the minimum conditions of a civilized state. Excuse me, but the Jews are in a spiritual body. The Jew is in a spiritual body. But the state of Israel is a political body. And as such, it is bound to follow and abide by the conditions and rules of a civilized, normal state. So they cannot settle people in occupied territories, period. Whether they are Jews or non-Jews. It's a state. They
But
cannot
you,
invoke they cannot invoke the Bible.
but you
And
understand what is behind this.
yeah, I know, I
I
know,
mean,
I
we are
know.
intelligent people. I
I
mean,
have visited twice. I have visited twice Auschwitz and twice Mauthausen. Twice.
no, well, my father was in Dachau as a prisoner, so we know about what we are speaking when we spoke about morale. But I want to say two things. In Germany, Israel and the Jewish issues is mixed together. It's one. Israel and the Jews are in a way wholly untouchable because of the German history, because of the extension of 6 or 7 million of Jews in the Second World War in the 30s. And second, so in this case, Germany will say that this is Staatsräson. It's one of its priorities of state policy of Germany to protect Israel and the Jews all everywhere in the world. So this is the way how the present elites are thinking. I don't know how the German elites will think in 10, 15 years when more people with migrant background will become members of parliaments, governments, local governments, federal government, then that might change. But at the present, it is as it is. And second, you have the United States. The United States don't have this religious, I think, view on Israel as or fundamentalist view, moral view as the German elites have. But they are very realistic in the sense they need Israel as the main ally against the Arab world. And so, therefore, because without Israel, America has no foothold in the region. So it needs Israel as its main partner, and it is interested to stay there in the region, not to leave it to China or to Russia or to other countries. So it will do everything to play one-sided on the field of Israel. This is Trump extremely in this way. That has something to do less with morale from a point of view, but mainly with geopolitics, with American geopolitics.
In my view, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Federal Republic of Germany, ranks among the very best, in my view, after 40 years of diplomatic life. If you ask me which is the very best Minister of Foreign Affairs of the West, I would probably say Germany. They are an impressive Minister of Foreign Affairs. How can they put up with a minister, well, inverted commas, kind of minister, that says, it's a good idea that Putin loses the war because then we will split Russia into small statelets. Madame Callas, this is a declaration of war. A minister of foreign affairs cannot say that. This is, provoking an Armageddon. The strategic doctrine of Russia is, if we see Russia in real danger of disappearing, of suffering, brutal defeat, we will launch a massive nuclear attack because a world without Russia does not deserve to live. Now, this is the official doctrine of Russia. How can Mrs. Callas be allowed to say this? What kind of professional approach is this?
It's not only Mrs. Callas, it's also the Greens in Germany, Mrs. Baerbock. Partly
Mrs.
also
Baerbock, oh God, oh God,
Mr. Merz will also
God.
repeat that. You
Mrs.
know,
Baerbock.
that has something to do again with morale. These people again are historically very little educated. They are led by emotions which, for me, it is not so strange, not so alien, because as a young student, I worked at the archives of Radio Free Europe. I, I had a lot of friends in Radio Free Europe, but this was an immigrant organization. But there, I witnessed or got acquainted with the ancestors or the kids of people like Bandera, or of the East European intellectuals who were suffering from communism, from the communist rules. And what united them all, the immigrant Russians, the immigrant Poles, the immigrant Czechs, and so on, was a full-fledged hatred against Russia and against the Soviet Union. And I thought that after the demise of Soviet Union, we would become friends in a way. We would understand that the times have changed and we have to come together on a kind of new fundaments and values in Europe. But no, people like Callas, they still tend to believe in their family history. They say my grandfather was chased or arrested by the Soviets, so I have to hate Russia today. Uh, I think it's her right to think like that, but it's not okay that such a person has become this job as a foreign minister of the European Union. This is a
It's
catastrophe, and
utterly unprofessional.
she's not interested in Gaza. She's not interested in the old hotspots in history. She will never travel to Latin America, to China, where she should go. Is not being met by Ruby in America. This was already downgrading for grading for her. She said for the whole day, from 7 o'clock in the morning till 10 o'clock in the evening, she only speaks about hatred towards Russia and wants the others to follow her in their thinking. And this
You
is
see, the
something, from my
problem
point
is,
of view, that out of touch with reality.
if, in fact, yes. But you see, in foreign relations, is ruled by interest, not by hate. Hate is like, if you eat a lot, you don't eat out of appetite, you eat out of anxiety. Well,
But
the
if
same happens to hatred. No matter what you give to people who hate, they are never satisfied. By definition, they cannot be strategists.
But let me, if you allow, yes, make another point, which is more complicated, especially German. The Germans, for many decades, were in a position where they had to acknowledge the guilt for killing Jews, for attacking the Soviet Union, for all the sins which they did during Second World War, and they were always blamed. In every major speech, even in Germany, outside Germany, Germany was reminded. The elites of Germany were reminded what they have done to the world in the 30s and the 40s under Hitler. Now, for many representatives of the German elites, came a new time where they can put this blame on Putin. They say Hitler is something which is past, which is gone. We have all said that we are wrong. I mean, we have suffered, we have prayed, we have done everything to make this forgotten, and ask for for a new recognition of a new Germany. But now it's time to see who the real Hitler is, who's the real totalitarian system, and this is the Russians. This is Putin. Therefore, the hatred. Therefore, the rhetoric of Mrs. Callas, who in these terms is very closely united with the thinking of the German elites. You have the thinking in Germany, you have it partly in Poland, you have it in Baltic states, not in other countries. Especially the thinking that Putin is the new Hitler and communism was more dangerous or more awful for the world than the Nazi regime and the Nazi ideology. And I think it's a very dangerous development. It's not historical. But it's a development or a process which is changing the mindset in Europe and will create new iron curtains, mental iron curtains between people, which might yeah, disturb further developments in Europe.
Yes, as a matter of fact, I had here written, uh, uh, is your sense of guilt affecting the foreign policy of Germany? Is perhaps the way to reach absolution, is the way to go to put an end to post-war guilt? So it was also in my mind, you know. Guilt is a highly complicated issue. Have you ever heard the Belgians feeling guilt for what they did in Congo? No. Have you ever heard the United Kingdom, England, apologize for what they did in the Crimean War? They prevented Constantinople from becoming Christian again, you know? Never. The Opium War in China? Never. Well, in those years, the Philippines belonged to Spain. And upon seeing what happened in China, the Spanish authorities forbade absolutely the growing of opium. Third, the Irish famine. Guilt? No guilt. So why you are guilt? Now, this is my opinion, modest opinion. I would like to hear your opinion as an echte Deutsch. What do you think? Is
But I'm
moral?
not an, you know, I must say I'm not an echte Deutsch because I grew up and I have roots from my grandparents with Tsarist Russia. These were
Well, but you are,
Russians, so
well,
they
but
come to Germany. But you are right that I grew up here. Actually, I was
you
born
are
here, but
German. So I wanted to ask you very seriously, don't you think that morals, in this case guilt, is political, a straitjacket that keeps you from becoming yourself again? Don't you think, perhaps my point of view is that of, you remember the book Finnish Germania? Perhaps
but
something like, perhaps I'm more German than the Germans, you know, but
but you know,
I,
this was my argument exactly. You are saying the same. The same argument is the Germans want to get rid of this jacket, which restrained them, and where they always had to admit that they carry the major guilt of history because of Hitler. They wanted to get rid of this. The new generations want to get off. They will never admit this openly, but this is in their heads. Yes, of course, the opportunity now it's there to to point the finger uh, from the past to Putin and say this is the new Hitler who has to be defeated. Otherwise, I mean, Russia will be in the same position as Germany, which could have won the Second World War. The Nazi tomb would grow in whole Europe. We have to stop it.
we have to move to politics, Mr. Rahr. How can you do that against the United States?
You can't do it against the United States right now. It will take, first of all, a very united Europe in order to build Europe as an actor of its own. And as we discussed before, Europe in this sense is split. So I think that what we will see in the next year, besides that, I cannot foresee what will come later. But for the next months, we'll see the attempts of London, Paris, and Berlin to build a new north of Europe. The Old West as an entity will disappear, and we will become a Europe of national states, I would say, in most parts of Europe, where countries will again more think about their national interests. And we will have a Kern Europa in the north, the London, Berlin, and Paris axis, more Berlin and London axis, which will become a new fortress of Europe, a new north, which, as I said, will think that it has to fight all dictators, non-liberal countries and states of the world, including Russia, China, United States.
United States too. Not bad. As a program, you said as a program. Okay. Now let's move to politics inside Germany, if you don't mind. Can you define for me what is, you know, this Alliance für Deutschland. What is this? Is neo-Nazi? Is not neo-Nazi? What is it? I'm confused.
Alternative für Deutschland is a party which I would describe foremost as a party of protest, a protest party. It has, of course, some people in its ranks which I would say are not Nazis, but very strong nationalists, German nationalists who sometimes use, of course, wording which are prohibited in Germany. It is true, but this is a splitting group inside this party. The party itself consists of conservative intellectuals who were disappointed with the other conservative party in Germany, the Christian Democratic Party, and so they left this party and joined the Alternative for Germany. But important is who votes for this party. I mean, we don't have Nazis in Germany. We have them, of course, somewhere in the underground, somewhere in former small towns of the former GDR. Obviously, there are some Nazis, but they are marginal. This is a minority, in my point of view. The majority of people who vote for the Alternative Germany are protest voters. Voters, normal Germans from all ages, younger, elder ones, who are so disappointed and frustrated with the ruling parties, with the systemic parties, that they want to teach them a lesson. And so they vote for Alternative of Germany, Alternative of Deutschland, not because they want Mrs. Weidel necessarily to become chancellor, the leader of this party, to become the chancellor of Germany. What actually might happen if the process continues like that in 4 years. But they want to teach a lesson to the systemic parties.
And
This
how
is the
about the left?
protest goal.
How about the left? Between Rosa Luxemburg, Weimar, and Baden-Württemberg, do you see the link as a worthy heir to this classical left, historical left?
You mean which historical left?
Well, Rosa Luxemburg, Weimar, and then Baden-Württemberg, which is a great moment in the social democracy. I think it was a great, great Zeitenwende.
I think that we are in a different time. I mean, the ideas of Rosa Luxemburg, Karl Liebknecht, also all this very important and famous social democrats and communists which were destroyed by the Nazi Reich. They are still in some memories, but I would say that the Social Democratic Party of Germany has lost its DNA, its genetic code, with this former ideas and ideologies. We don't have a true social democratic party anymore in Germany. The Social Democratic Party is in shambles. It is losing elections everywhere. They were so lucky to have Scholz as a chancellor for 3.5 years, but only because the Christian Democratic Party is also suffering actually one catastrophe in voting after another. The centrist parties are losing. We have in Germany more an ideological mindset where you have on the one hand the Alternative of Germany, which poses an alternative from the conservative point of view to the situation in Germany, and you have, say, the left, the former left, which in true is not the left anymore. It's more the Green Party, because the Greens have an ideology. It is not an ecological ideology. It is based on liberal values, artificially made to the ranks of a religion, which they want to proclaim and bring not only into every German household, but also export them to other continents and to other countries, which I think they will never manage. But important is that the Green Party itself is supported only by 11-12% of the population. The Alternative of Deutschland is supported by 25% of Germans today. But the important thing to understand is that 80%, 85% of the German ruling elite consists of Greens. These are all editors of journals and newspapers, of the media. These are judges, also of the Constitutional Court. These are lawyers. These are all leading figures in the educational system of Germany. This is bureaucracy in all the ministries. These are the Greens, and also the power ministries
And
of the
Oscar Lafontaine?
intelligence service.
Oscar Lafontaine?
Oscar Lafontaine is one of the very last remaining socialist politicians who is over 80s and who is unfortunately marginalized in Europe. And in Germany, he's trying to support his wife, Sarah Wagenknecht, who, as you know, has created its own party, which is not a leftist party, is the right party and the left party, both, and also centrist party altogether. But she has failed to enter the new parliament because she couldn't overcome the 5% barrier.
Very well. And I think that I have a last question for you, which shows in my mind. Do you think that it would be a good idea, finally, to put an end to the Second World War by signing a peace treaty?
I think it's very, very important to sign a peace treaty for the whole Europe. And I think it is a catastrophe that the West has decided in the 90s of the last century to build the future Europe only of the two pillars of NATO and European Union. We completely forgot the OSCE. This year we will celebrate the 50th anniversary of the existence of the OSCE. And the OSCE has, on the paper, unfortunately not in reality anymore, but on paper enough potentials, enough institutional power, if other states wanted to do it, to become a common European organization, also with a united European ideology, and also an organization which could lead to a security arrangement which would suit the interests of all, of Great Britain, of Russia, of Turkey, and the United States on our continent. This is possible, but you need more intelligent politicians, more sober politicians to understand the need for this peaceful solution, for the new Friedensordnung in Germany, in Europe, but also in Germany, in Russia, in the United States, and everywhere. I think this is, from today's point of view, unrealistic, but allow me to dream about that.
Good. You know that when the Soviet Union collapsed, the Federal Republic of Germany, his wonderful Minister of Foreign Affairs, showed up a map. His idea was to create a system of security going from France to Vladivostok. And the United States said never, never. It has to be NATO or nothing. Final result, the war. A system of security necessarily has to be agreed upon. So Russia has to agree. If it does not agree, then it's a diktat. It's not a system of security. It's a Treaty of Versailles. And this is what we have been, employing or using the past 30 years. And everybody was a professional like myself expecting the war because it was inevitable, This is not so. There is no security. If your opposite doesn't want what you offer him, you have to reach an agreement. Otherwise, it's war. George F. Kennan said it, Russia will end or shall end by doing something bad. And those who have told us to enlarge NATO will say, you see, the Russians are bad. We already told you. And we will say, you are wrong. It's not very difficult,
You are right. I think it's a very important statement at the end of our interview. The danger which I see it that the future of Europe for the next couple of decades will be designed by a new Yalta II. Americans and by Russians over the heads of many Europeans, with support of part of Europeans, but never. And then we will look once in maybe in 1,000 years back to this time of now and say, well, after 45, Europe was always directed or ruled by non-European, not truly European actors, by the United States, by the Soviet Union, then again by Trump and the United States, and now by Russia, which is partly Asia. And the failure of Europe, would be to find a unity. But the wrong perception of the Western Europe was that it wanted to create a Europe only on the fundaments, on the ideals of the West. And they never took into account other interests, which also exists partly in the east of Europe. And this was something what at the end will bring Europe in a very unhealthy and unhappy position.
Very well. Any final remark, Mr. Rahr?
I hope that we will proceed in thinking about the future of Europe. I still tend to believe in a Europe between Lisbon and Vladivostok, because I don't see any kind of alternatives. We're culturally united. We have a common history, despite the wars which we fought over the decades and millenniums, if you want, on this territory of this continent. But nevertheless, intelligent people, or people who understood that one needs to find a common future for the security and for peace, always thought in these big terms of unity and not of disunity.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Rahr. Thank you.